Describe the most terrifying thing that has happened to you. When I was in Russia, I was on my way to Moscow from St. Petersburg with some friends. We stopped at a McDonald's on the road. I know you're supposed to do Russian things in Russia, but this was seriously the first stop we'd come across, and we were all starving. We pulled up and grabbed something to eat. We were all hanging around, and I noticed two of my guy friends were chatting with some Russian dudes at their car. I'm watching this from inside because I am waiting to use the bathroom. One Russian was clearly pretty drunk. He was wearing a t-shirt, and it was November and reached near Moscow. I have never been so cold in my life, and he was with three other guys. They were all pretty huge, and they all got out of the car to chat with my two friends. I finally get to use the bathroom, and when I come out, I notice my friends are not talking with these dudes anymore and are heading back to the car. The Finn we were traveling with starts honking the horn to let us know we should head out, so I start heading towards the car. I have to go past these Russians who by now are all hanging around their car smoking. As I pass, one of them waves at I, and I wave back. They say something in Russian, but I have no idea what it is, and then one of them lunges at me, grab me, picks me up and starts trying to shove me into their car. I'm a pretty small girl, but I start struggling and fighting back and screaming. My two friends start running back to where I am, and the Fine pulls the car forward. I'm just struggling and try not to let them push me through the door. One of them has gotten into the driver's seat and started their car, but I'm still half out of the vehicle as my friends rush up and pull the guy and me into his arms back from the car. I guess they had thought that I was alone and maybe easy prey, but then they realized that I was with three guys. He put me down and put his hands up and tried to laugh it off and smile as my friends pull me back behind them and try to be menacing. We all get in the car and pull away. The Finn let me know I was lucky and that white slavery is a big problem in Russia, and then I should definitely never travel alone. My brother and I were swinging on the swing sets at a playground. This couple with their toddler baby sits down on a bench adjacent to us shortly after. They point their child a waddle in the direction of where we were swinging, only 5 feet away. My brother hit him pretty hard with his feet since we weren't paying attention and were just trying to swing as high as we could before jumping. The guy went flying, and we intermediate stopped swinging to check on him. There the baby was bawling and bleeding from the mouth, but the parents didn't seem to be too concerned as didn't say anything. When they picked their baby back up, I remember their faces showed no expression as they picked the baby back up by the arm. As they went to sit back down with the baby, both of them just sat there not saying a word to each and just watched my brother and I. Once again we started our swinging contest, and they pushed their baby to walk in the direction of us. This time around I had switched places with my brother and was able to stop just in time before I would hit him. At the moment I just felt really uncomfortable and told my brother that we should go play some C1 home. After that told our mom, who in turn called the maps. I can still remember turning around and looking at both of them, just staring at me and my brother walking home. Hope that baby is okay. I worked as an assistant manager for the big retail company but small store a couple of years ago during the holiday season. It was a really rainy morning after a huge sales day, and no one was around. It was eerily quiet. As I put away some items, I stopped myself for a moment and thought, this is a perfect opportunity for a thief to come in here and rob me. Well, it was one of my few predictions to become as true as it did. A matter of 10 or 20 minutes later, a man entered the store fully covered except for his eyes. I could hear the fear in his voice and sense it in his eyes, and that terrified me. Considering he had a gun up to my face, disbelief came before fear. However, I couldn't imagine I would ever be in this situation. I immediately started opening the register while assuring him he could have whatever he wanted. I also instinctively kept my eyes away from him because I didn't want him to think I was trying to remember him to identify him. I figured I'd rather survive this than make him nervous and blast me on his own defense. After giving him a bag full of money, he told me to turn around and get on my knees. It was at this moment I thought I was going to be executed in a retail store. I didn't know what to do. As soon as I heard him say and count to 1, I'd rest assured he just wanted me to stay this way so he could get away unseen. I don't know how long I even stayed this way before I felt it was safe enough to turn around and phone the police. It was pretty scary. I haven't worked retail since, and as a matter of the fact, I moved on to start my career in technology, and I couldn't be happier. I guess some things do happen for a reason, right? I was dosed with a lid and no one told me. Started feeling weird, so I left the house I was hanging at and tried to walk home. It took me 2 hours. It's a 10-minute walk over. I don't really remember much from the walk, but once I got home, my roommate is standing in the dark in the living room and he says to me, I can't sleep. There is something pounding under the ground. I have been an avid Lovecraft reader for many years, so I start to freak out and locked me in my room. I spent the rest of the trip that I remember lying in the dark looking down at myself in the third person, I guess battling my evil alternate twin who was trying to take over my body. My one friend on the other side of the country claims I called him to let him know that my shoes had me trapped in my room and they were coming for me. I was an experienced drug user before this, but it was hands down the single most horrifying experience I've ever had. Just thinking about it gives me shivers. Needless to say, I don't take those types of drugs anymore. When I was around 19 or 20, my grandfather passed away after a long illness. He was an incredible man and figured in some significant moments of my county's history. Late one Friday night, I arrived home pretty wasted and headed straight to the kitchen to make some snacks. The house was completely quiet except for some background noise on the TV, which my mom had left on, as usual, to scare away any would-be burglars. So I'm sitting there on my own munching away on a bacon sandwich when all of a sudden I hear my grandfather talking in the other room. I nearly choked on my snack. I have never been so freaked out in my entire life. His voice was so distinctive I knew there was no question that he was not in the other room. As I slowly walked out of the kitchen in an incredulous state, his voice started getting louder and louder as I entered our front room where he was before me. There was a rerun of a documentary he had once been interviewed in on TV. It was by far the freakiest, creepiest moment of my life, quickly followed by such happiness and warmth at seeing my grandfather on TV. When 13, I was living in this ratty apartment complex with my mom. During the entire time I lived there, I was continually harassed by this one older kid who seemingly had an unquenchable rage boner for me. One day while I was playing basketball, apropos of nothing, he came out on the court and shoved the out of me. I fell down and I remember him staring over me, snickering like some rat-faced ghoul. This sort of thing was the norm. It was how our relationship worked. He dogging me out, I'd take, and he'd eventually get bored and go away. But that day was different. I stood up and punched him. To this day I consider it the best punch I've ever thrown. My fist connected just under his right eye with a sickening wet thud. I felt the bone shift under the weight of my fist. He crumpled to a mound on the concrete and I stepped over him and went home. When I don't see the guy for the better part of a week, I figure I'm in the clear. I stood up for myself and won. This is what my dad was talking about. And then one night I'm out practicing my free throws alone on the basketball court. I see a group of guys heading my way. I think nothing of it until I see my tormentor wordlessly step onto the far end of the court right. I bandaged. I later found out that I had cracked his orbital without sucker punch with 3 of his friends behind him. My heart sank. I knew what was coming. They beat me savagely for the better part of 5 minutes. Every time I went down they kicked me until someone stood me back up. The grand finale was pinning me against the fence, holding a knife to my throat and making me beg for my life. I went to the hospital and was treated for concussion, bruised ribs, innumerable abrasions, including a 2-inch wide, a 1-inch deep gash on my bicep that had to be sutured, and 2 broken fingers. One of the guys had accidentally stepped on my hand when I was on the ground. I was taking the engine out of a 76 Firebird. I was around 19 to 20 years old and had worked on cars quite a bit growing up and was comfortable underneath the car. I was working on removing the motor mount bolts from underneath when in a split second I realized I was rocking the car while trying to break the rusty motor mount bolts, and at the same instant I recalled I also had forgotten to use jack stands. The moment I realized this was the moment the car rocked too far and came down on my chest. This car was lowered a bit, and while it didn't break any ribs, it knocked a little of the last breath I was able to take as it was coming down. I concluded if I screamed I probably wouldn't be able to inhale much, but I was able to hold it much longer anyway, so I screamed like a person who believes they're dying screams. Thankfully 2 family friends just so happened to pull up in the driveway at the moment this was happening. 2 buddies grabbed each side of the front of the car and picked it up just enough for me to slide out, but not before dropping it once on me. Moral of the story, always use jack stands. I was a nook going for a little hike up a hill with my dad, and amongst the Rockies. Long story short, we got in over our heads. What we thought was a hill was the nose of a huge mountain. Yes, it is possible to see a hill and not be able to see from some angles that it is part of a monster mountain. There was no way to come down the way we came. We had to keep climbing until we could get to the top of the part we were climbing and come down another way. The scariest part was a time when I was trying to catch my breath and have only a 2 or 3 inches ledge for 1 foot in a couple of little places for my hands. I made the mistake of looking down. The drop wasn't straight like a cliff face, but it was almost that steep, and certainly way too steep to stop any fall. I would have tumbled down 20 or 30 stories, bashing myself on rock. their hallway, the mixture of fear and exhaustion. This was after almost 3 hours of climbing for our lives caused my foot to start twitching and shaking its way off of the little ledge. The other foot was already just dangling in the air with nowhere to go. My dad was blocking any further climbing, catching his breath and evaluating the next move. I was watching my foot shake itself off and finally blurted, "Dad, I need to be where you are right now." He found a way to get higher up, and I found the strength to make it to where he was, a slightly better place to pause. I knew I was asking something risky about him making him move without being prepared, so in addition to my own physical fear, I was terrified that I might cause him to fall. We both made it, and shortly after we were through the hardest part and then got to the top area we originally set out for. My mom, my wife, and the daughter was 10 minutes away from shopping. I was very scared for my dad. I was very scared for myself, but the really terrifying part was thinking of my wife explaining to my 2-year-old that I wasn't coming back. That was about 10 times more terrifying than the fear of physical pain from falling. I was 14 or so and was in the backyard with my parents and some people they had over to visit. We had a few dogs running around in the backyard, and one of them started acting really strange. He was standing in the middle of it under one of the trees the dogs usually spent most of their time running up and down the fenced edges and were spinning around, biting at the air, etc. Curious as to what was wrong, and started walking towards him and realized he must be biting or chasing at some sort of insect. Well, the next step I took, my foot sank into the ground and I heard a loud crunch from underneath. The next sound that filled my ears were the sudden angry droning of dozens of hundreds of angry honeybees. First I felt one sting, then another, then I was in the middle of an entire swarm. I turned in place to the people across the yard, yelled, "There are bees out here," and took off running as fast as I could towards the back door of the garage. A giant swarm of bees right on top of me, stinging me left and right. I get inside and look down, horrified to see the entire front of my t-shirt and my jeans were covered in bees. It was like one of those bee beards you see in videos where they're all clinging on like a buzzing curtain, yet they're also stinging me through. But there are simply too many, and now I have stings all over my hands, my arms, everywhere. I briefly thought about trying to head to the shower, but I didn't want to wait for one more second to get these damn bees off of me, and I figured most of them might stay attached to my clothes, so I took a deep breath and pulled my bee-covered t-shirt up over my head and off. As you might imagine, the bees did not appreciate this at all. Now I had these stings all over my face, my eyebrows, my lips. Once I get my shirt off, my course is set. The garage is now filled with bees, so I blaze a path from the garage into the kitchen of the house, and the next piece of clothing to go is my pants. I'm leaving a trail of clothing and bees behind as I run desperately through the house, shoes flying off, socks flying off, screaming all the way until I make it to my parents' bedroom, slam the door shut behind me to keep out any trailing bees, and collapse on my parents' bed, stripped naked down to my 80 widest. Breathe. I tell myself, just breathe. I'm exhausted, my whole body aches, and I've got strains everywhere. Thanks for listening. The subscribe button and activate the notification bell for more things you don't want to know. Let us know in the comments what you think about these stories.